The mining world of Vero was not a beautiful place. Its skies were always gray, filled with thick clouds of dust that never cleared. The land was rough and broken, with sharp rocks and long cracks that ran across the surface like scars. Workers came from far-away planets, not because they liked the place, but because there were rare metals hidden under the ground. Every day heavy machines drilled, cut, and shook the land. Far from the noise of the mining camp, in the deep caves of the northern cliffs, there was another life. The caves were home to creatures that very few humans had ever seen. Among them were the albino dragons, a rare kind with pale white scales that shimmered faintly when light touched them. They were quiet and secretive, living away from human eyes. The people of the camp told stories about them, but most thought the stories were only myths. In one of those caves, hidden behind a wall of stone, lay a nest. Inside the nest were 4 small hatchlings. Their bodies were thin, their wings still soft and folded. They had only just opened their eyes a few weeks earlier. Their mother had cared for them, bringing them food and curling her body around them for warmth. She had always returned after leaving for the hunt. But this time, she did not return. The hatchlings waited. At first they only chirped softly, calling for her. The sound echoed off the cold stone walls. Hours passed, and the chirps grew louder, sharper, almost like cries. The little dragons stretched their necks toward the cave entrance, hoping to see the familiar shadow of their mother's wings. But the opening remained empty. The cave was silent except for the faint drip of water from the ceiling. The young ones grew restless. They climbed over each other, their small claws scratching the stone. One of them tried to crawl toward the cave mouth, but its legs shook and it fell back into the nest. Their stomachs ached with hunger, and their thin bodies began to tremble. The cold of the cavern pressed down on them, and they huddled together for warmth. Outside, the wind carried the sound of their cries down the cliffs. The sound was strange and thin, almost like whistling. It traveled farther than they knew, reaching the ears of someone who was not a dragon at all. Ryan was on night patrol near the edge of the camp. He was a simple worker, not a leader or a fighter. His job was to walk the borders, check the machines, and make sure nothing was broken or missing. He liked the night watch because it was quiet. While others drank or argued in the noisy camp, Ryan preferred silence. He often wandered a little farther than he was supposed to, letting his eyes study the cliffs and the sky. That night, as he stood on a ridge, he heard the faint sound. At first he thought it was the wind moving through cracks in the rock. But the sound came again, higher this time, like a call. He frowned and turned his lamp toward the cliffs. The light showed only stone and shadows, yet the sound tugged at his mind. Ryan hesitated. The rules were clear. No worker was supposed to wander too far from the marked patrol lines. The cliffs were unsafe, with sudden drops and unstable ground. But the sound did not stop. It came again, faint but sharp, like a child crying in the distance. Something in Ryan's chest pulled him forward. He told himself he would only go a little closer, just to see if it was the wind. Step by step, he moved toward the sound. His boots scraped against the rough stone. The air grew colder as he climbed higher up the cliffside. Finally he reached a narrow opening in the rock. The sound was stronger now, echoing from within. He raised his lamp and leaned closer. The light spilled into the darkness, showing a tunnel that sloped downward. Ryan's heart beat faster. He was not a brave man, and he knew there could be danger inside. But something about those cries made it impossible for him to walk away. Carefully, he bent low and entered the passage. The tunnel was damp and uneven, forcing him to move slowly. His lamp cast long shadows across the stone walls. The cries grew louder with each step. After what felt like many minutes, the tunnel opened into a wide chamber. At the center of the chamber was a nest made of broken branches, soft moss, and pieces of bone. In the nest were 4 small creatures, their pale scales glowing faintly under his lamp. Ryan froze. Dragons. He had heard the stories, but he had never believed them. And yet here they were, real and alive. Their bodies were small, no bigger than cats, but their wings showed what they would one day become. They looked weak, their movements slow, their cries filled with hunger. The hatchlings noticed him at once. Their heads turned, their pink eyes glowing in the light. One hissed, baring tiny teeth. Another gave a thin squeak, half warning and half plea. They tried to look fierce, but their weakness showed in every motion. Ryan felt no fear. Instead, he felt a strange sorrow. These creatures were alone. He could see it in the way they kept glancing at the cave mouth, waiting for someone who would never come. He lowered his lamp and slowly sat on a rock, keeping distance so he would not scare them. The hatchlings quieted a little. Their eyes stayed fixed on him, but their cries softened. Ryan said nothing. He simply sat there, breathing slowly, letting them see he was no threat. Minutes passed. The smallest of the hatchlings, its wings folded tight against its body, crawled closer to him. It did not come all the way, but it pressed against its siblings and stopped crying. Ryan's chest tightened. He knew in that moment that something had changed. He had found something rare, something fragile, something in need of care. And though he did not yet know how, he felt deep inside that he would not turn away. The cave was silent again, but it was no longer the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of a new bond forming, fragile and uncertain, yet alive. Ryan did not sleep that night. After returning to the camp, he lay in his small metal bunk, staring at the ceiling, but his thoughts stayed with the hatchlings in the cavern. He had never seen anything so fragile and yet so full of quiet strength. Their pink eyes had followed him until he left, and the sound of their cries still echoed in his mind. He knew he should report what he had found. The rules of the mining company were strict. Any discovery of local creatures had to be shared with the supervisors. They would send hunters, cages, and trucks. The hatchlings would be taken away, and no one knew what would happen to them. Some might call them dangerous, others might try to sell them. Ryan's chest grew heavy at the thought. When dawn came, the camp stirred with the usual noise. Workers marched to their shifts, machines roared to life, and the smell of oil filled the air. Ryan moved with the others, pretending nothing was different, but he kept glancing toward the northern cliffs. His mind was no longer in the camp. It was in the cavern with the pale hatchlings. By evening, when his shift ended, Ryan could not resist. He filled a small bag with scraps of dried meat and a half-empty water flask. He told himself it was foolish, that he was wasting time, yet his feet carried him to the cliffs again. The climb felt easier this time. He knew where the narrow crack in the stone was, and he slipped into the passage without fear. The cries greeted him as before, though they were weaker now, thinner, as if the hatchlings were growing tired from hunger. His heart ached at the sound. When his lamp lit the chamber, the hatchlings stirred. Their small heads lifted, and they made soft sounds. They remembered him. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, but this time their cries did not sound only like fear. There was something else inside them, a faint note of hope. Ryan sat down on the same rock as the night before. Slowly, he reached into his bag and pulled out a piece of dried meat. He did not throw it at them. He placed it carefully on the ground, halfway between himself and the nest. Then he leaned back and waited. The hatchlings stared. Their thin bodies trembled. One of them hissed weakly, but another crept forward, pulling itself with shaky claws. It sniffed the air, then stopped, uncertain. Ryan stayed still, his hands resting on his knees, his lamp steady. At last the brave hatchling reached the meat. It sniffed again, then gave a quick bite. The taste was strange, but hunger was stronger. The little dragon chewed, then swallowed. The others watched, and soon they too crawled forward, one after another. In minutes the scrap was gone. Ryan felt his chest loosen with relief. He placed another piece, then another, until all 4 hatchlings had eaten. They made soft chirping sounds, not cries of pain this time but tiny notes of comfort. When the last of the food was gone, they lay down again, curling against each other. Their eyes blinked slowly as if sleep was pulling them closer. Ryan watched them in silence. He had done something against the rules, yet he felt no guilt. Instead he felt a quiet pride. Without him, they might not have survived another night. He had given them a chance, and that mattered more than any rule. He stayed until their eyes closed and their breaths grew steady. Then he stood and turned to leave. But as he stepped back toward the tunnel, he felt a small tug at his boot. He looked down. The smallest hatchling, the one who had been the bravest, had crawled after him. Its tiny claw rested on the edge of his boot, its eyes wide and soft. Ryan bent down slowly. He did not touch it, but he lowered his face so the hatchling could see him clearly. "I will come back," he whispered, though the creature could not understand his words. Still, it seemed to pause, as if sensing his promise. Then it turned and crawled back to its siblings. That night Ryan walked back to the camp with a strange warmth in his chest. Over the next few days, he returned again and again. Each time he brought scraps of food, water, or anything that could help. The hatchlings grew a little stronger. Their wings stretched wider, their steps steadier. At first they only hissed and snapped, but soon they began to chirp softly when he entered, as if greeting him. Ryan began to speak to them, not expecting them to understand. He told them simple stories about Earth, about blue oceans and green forests, places they would never see. His voice was calm, steady, like a parent speaking to children at night. The hatchlings listened, their pink eyes fixed on him. Though they did not know his words, they seemed to feel the care behind them. One evening, as he sat by the nest, one hatchling did something new. It climbed onto his boot and rested its small head on his leg. Ryan froze, not daring to move. The little creature breathed slowly, its body warm against his clothes. Soon another joined, curling beside the first. Within minutes, all 4 were pressed close to him, their bodies a cluster of pale scales and tiny wings. Ryan felt his throat tighten. They no longer feared him. They trusted him. But even as joy filled him, a shadow of worry grew. He knew others would notice his absences. The miners were quick to suspect, and they did not share his kindness. If they found the hatchlings, they would see only profit or danger. Ryan realized he would have to be careful. For now, though, he let himself enjoy the moment. He sat still while the hatchlings slept against him, their tiny breath soft and steady. The cavern was quiet, but it was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of safety, of a bond forming between human and dragon. When he finally left, he carried their warmth with him. The hatchlings had found food and comfort. And he had found something he had never expected on this cold mining world: a reason to care, a reason to protect. The days passed, and Ryan's secret life grew larger. By morning he was only another worker in the noisy camp, carrying tools, checking machines, and listening to the endless shouts of supervisors. By evening, he slipped away to the northern cliffs, carrying food hidden under his jacket. The cavern became his true world, the place where he felt alive. The hatchlings were changing. Their cries were no longer sharp with hunger. Their bodies had grown stronger, their scales harder and brighter under his lamp. They moved more quickly, crawling and testing their small wings. They often stumbled, falling into each other, but they tried again and again with a determination that made Ryan smile. He spoke to them every night. He told them about the seas of earth, about the sound of rain on rooftops, about the taste of fresh fruit that did not come from a camp storage box. He described the sunlight that could warm skin instead of the pale gray light of Vera. The hatchlings could not know the meaning of his words, yet they listened. Their pink eyes stayed on him, and sometimes they tilted their heads as if trying to understand. One evening, as Ryan laid food near the nest, he paused. He had been careful not to touch them, letting them choose when to come close. But that night the smallest hatchling, the same one that had first eaten from his scraps, climbed onto his lap. It curled into a tight ball and rested there, breathing softly. Ryan froze at first, then slowly placed his hand near it, not touching but close enough for the little creature to feel his warmth. The other hatchlings soon followed, pressing against his boots and legs. Ryan felt a weight in his chest, not of fear but of decision. He could no longer think of them as only creatures he had discovered. They were lives depending on him. If he stopped coming, if he turned away, they would not survive. He understood now that caring for them was not only kindness but duty. That night, when he returned to the camp, the air felt heavier than before. He knew the risk he carried. The company rules were clear. Wildlife was to be reported. To hide it was to break contract, a crime in the eyes of the supervisors. If they found out, they could take his pay, his place, or worse. Yet as he walked among the miners, hearing their rough laughter and careless talk, he knew they would never treat the hatchlings with care. To them, the creatures were nothing more than tools for profit or problems to be removed. Ryan sat alone in the mess hall, pushing cold food around his plate. He thought about the hatchlings pressed against him, their tiny bodies trembling in sleep, and his decision grew firm. He would protect them. No matter what rules he broke, no matter what it cost, he would not abandon them. The next day he searched the storage shed for old blankets, broken tools, and scraps that no one would miss. He carried them in pieces to the cavern, making a warmer bed near the nest. The hatchlings crawled over the cloth, chirping softly, as if thanking him. He gave them water from his flask, tilting it carefully so they could drink. One of them sneezed, splashing its siblings, and for the first time, Ryan laughed out loud. The cavern, once cold and empty, felt alive with their presence. But each small act deepened his secret. He began to stay longer in the cavern, sometimes until the first light of dawn. His eyes grew tired at work, his hands slower with the machines. Other miners noticed. "Ryan, you look half asleep," one man said during a shift. "Out too late drinking," another teased. Ryan forced a smile, shaking his head, but he felt their eyes on him. Suspicion spread easily in the camp, where every worker fought for scraps of pay. He knew he had to be careful. That evening, when he walked toward the cliffs, he took a longer path, circling wide so no one would follow. The hatchlings greeted him with soft chirps, and his worry faded for a while. They crawled over his boots, tugging at his clothes, and he sat down with them pressing close. He fed them slowly, one piece at a time, watching them grow stronger. For a moment, he forgot the camp, the rules, the dangers. He was only a man with 4 small lives that trusted him. Later, as he prepared to leave, he looked back at the nest. The hatchlings were curled together, their pale scales glowing faintly in the dark. His lamp lit the cavern walls, and he realized how empty the place would have been without them. The thought struck him hard. If he had walked away that first night, the cavern would now hold only silence. On the path back to camp, the decision inside him hardened into truth. He would not tell anyone. He would bring food, warmth, and care. The hatchlings were his to protect. Whatever the future brought, he would face it. Yet deep in his heart, a whisper of worry remained. Secrets had weight, and the camp was full of sharp eyes. Sooner or later, someone would notice. For now, though, Ryan held onto the warmth of the hatchlings pressed against him, and he walked into the grey night with a quiet smile. The bond between Ryan and the hatchlings grew stronger with each passing day. What began as careful feeding and silent watching slowly turned into something deeper. The cavern that once felt like a place of shadows now felt like a home to him. The cries of the hatchlings, once sharp with hunger and fear, now often sounded like playful chirps. The hatchlings were learning. Their legs grew firmer, their claws sharper, and their wings stretched wider than before. They stumbled less when they moved, and sometimes they flapped their wings in quick bursts, lifting themselves a few inches before tumbling back to the ground. Every time they tried, Ryan clapped his hands softly and smiled, encouraging them. He found joy in their small victories. One evening, after feeding them, Ryan sat against the cave wall, tired from work. His eyes were half closed when he felt something warm touch his side. Opening his eyes, he saw the smallest hatchling climbing onto his lap. It curled into a ball and rested its head on his chest. Soon another followed, then another, until all 4 were pressed against him, their scales cool but their bodies warm with life. Ryan stayed very still, his hand resting near them but not pressing down. The hatchlings gave soft sounds, almost like purring. For the first time since he had come to Vera, Ryan felt peace. The next night, he decided to test something. He placed food closer to his boots instead of the usual spot. At first the hatchlings hesitated, but hunger gave them courage. One by one they crawled toward him and ate near his feet. Then he moved the food again, closer still. This time the bravest climbed onto his leg to eat. Ryan laughed quietly, his heart light. Step by step, their trust was growing. Over the following days, Ryan spoke to them more often. His voice was calm, steady, and gentle. "You are stronger now," he said one night, watching them flap their wings. "One day you will fly high above these cliffs." The hatchlings tilted their heads, listening. They could not know his words, but they seemed to enjoy the sound of his voice. Sometimes they even chirped back, as if answering him in their own way. Ryan shared stories from his past. He told them about the little farm his family once kept on Earth, about the animals he had cared for as a boy. He described the wide blue sky, the smell of fresh soil after rain, and the laughter of his younger brother. His voice sometimes grew soft with sadness, but the hatchlings stayed close, pressing against him as if offering silent comfort. One night, as Ryan returned to the cavern, the hatchlings ran toward him instead of waiting in the nest. Their small claws tapped against the stone, their wings flapping clumsily. They chirped loudly, circling around his boots. He smiled, kneeling down so they could climb onto him. They no longer saw him as a stranger. To them, he had become part of their world. But not everything was safe. Ryan's absences were becoming harder to hide. In the camp, other miners had begun to notice that he often disappeared after work. One man muttered, "Ryan sneaks off every night. Maybe he found a secret mine." Another laughed and said, "Or maybe he hides treasure." Ryan heard their whispers, but he kept quiet. He avoided long talks in the mess hall and finished his work quickly so he could return to the cavern. Still, the weight of the secret pressed heavier on him. Inside the cavern, though, his worries faded. One evening, the hatchlings did something new. After eating, they began to nudge him with their small heads. At first he thought they wanted more food, but then he realized they wanted to play. They darted around his boots, snapping gently at his laces, and even tried to climb up his arms. Ryan laughed, a sound rare in his life on Vera. He picked up a broken stick and waved it slowly. The hatchlings chased it, chirping with joy. For hours he played with them, forgetting time. When he finally stood to leave, they chirped sadly, not wanting him to go. Ryan knelt and whispered, "I will come back, I promise." The words were soft, but the hatchlings seemed to calm at the sound. The trust was not only theirs. Ryan too had begun to trust them. At first he worried about their teeth and claws, but now he let them climb on him freely. One even crawled onto his shoulder, spreading its small wings as if proud to be higher than the others. Ryan laughed and let it stay there as he spoke. As the days turned into weeks, the hatchlings grew larger. They still needed him, but their strength was clear. Their scales shone brighter, their eyes sharper. They were no longer weak creatures waiting for a mother who would never return. They had chosen a new guardian, and that guardian was human. Still, Ryan knew the danger outside the cavern was real. The company's rules, the greed of miners, the suspicion in their eyes, all of it hung like a shadow over his bond with the hatchlings. But when he sat with them, their heads resting on his lap, their breath steady and soft, the shadow seemed far away. He told himself that as long as he was careful, the secret would remain safe. He would guard them, feed them, and keep them hidden until they were strong enough to survive on their own. That night, as he left the cavern, he looked back once more. The hatchlings were curled together, their bodies glowing faintly in the dark. They no longer cried for the mother who had left them. They had found comfort in another. Ryan walked back to camp with a new thought in his mind. Trust was no longer something fragile between them. It had become a bond, one that tied his heart to theirs. And he knew he would fight to protect it, no matter what the future brought. Ryan's visits to the cavern had become the best part of his life on Vera. Every evening, no matter how heavy his shift felt, he carried scraps of food, water, or broken cloth to the hatchlings. They no longer feared him. They rushed toward him when he entered, their small wings flapping, their pink eyes bright with excitement. The cavern echoed with their chirps, and Ryan felt warmth in a world otherwise filled with cold stone and noise. But secrets were heavy things. For weeks, Ryan had been careful to hide his absences. He left the camp quietly, returning when most workers were asleep. Still, it was only a matter of time before others noticed. The miners were curious, and curiosity on Vera often turned into suspicion. One night, after finishing his shift, Ryan carried a small bag of food and walked toward the cliffs. He did not know that 2 miners followed him. Their names were Bram and Cole. Both were known for greed and for looking at every situation as a chance for profit. They had whispered about Ryan for days, wondering where he vanished each night. Now, seeing him slip away with a bag, their suspicion grew stronger. Ryan reached the cavern, unaware of the eyes behind him. He knelt by the nest, laying out food. The hatchlings chirped happily, crawling to him and climbing over his boots. Ryan laughed quietly, the sound soft and warm. It was in that moment of peace that Bram and Cole stepped into the cavern. Their lamps lit the chamber, and the hatchlings froze. They hissed softly, their small bodies pressing against Ryan. He turned sharply, his heart racing. The miners stared, their mouths open, their eyes wide. "By the stars," Bram whispered. "They are real." Cole's face broke into a greedy smile. "Albino dragons. Do you know what these are worth? On the black markets, collectors would pay more than we earn in 10 years. Ryan stood quickly, moving in front of the hatchlings. "Stay back," he said firmly. His voice shook, but his eyes were steady. Bram laughed, though uneasily. "You have been hiding this. All this time you sneaked away, and now we know why. You think you can keep them for yourself? No, friend. This is a fortune waiting for us." "They are not for sale," Ryan said. His words were sharp, but inside his chest his heart beat painfully fast. He knew these men. They were not joking. Cole stepped forward, his lamp swinging across the cavern walls. "Don't be foolish. The company would cage them anyway. Better we take them first. We can split the profit." The hatchlings gave small cries, pressing tighter against Ryan's legs. He felt their tiny bodies trembling, and something inside him hardened. "They are not profit. They are lives," he said. "I found them alone, without their mother. They trust me. I will not let you touch them." For a moment there was silence, broken only by the soft breaths of the hatchlings. Then Bram scowled. "You are mad. You risk your place, your pay, everything, for these little beasts? They will grow into monsters one day. Why protect them?" Ryan's hands curled into fists, though he did not raise them. "Because they needed someone. And I was there. That is reason enough." The words surprised even himself, but they were true. He had not chosen the hatchlings for gain. He had chosen them because leaving them to die felt wrong. In their eyes he had seen trust, and trust was something he could not betray. Cole's face twisted with frustration. "We cannot let you keep the secret. Others must know." "Tell them," Ryan said quietly. His voice no longer shook. "But you will not take them tonight." The hatchlings hissed again, louder this time. One of them even snapped its tiny jaws, showing teeth that were still small but sharp. The miners stepped back slightly, surprised by the sound. Bram muttered, "Dangerous already. Better we deal with them now." Before he could step forward again, something unexpected happened. The smallest hatchling, the one that had always been the bravest, pushed itself to the front. It spread its tiny wings, hissed, and released a spark of fire. The flame was weak and brief, no larger than a candle, but it lit the cavern with sudden light. The miners shouted and stumbled backward. Even Ryan was shocked, his eyes wide. The hatchling chirped loudly, pressing against his boot as if declaring him its protector. The other hatchlings followed, curling close to him, their wings trembling. Bram and Cole exchanged a glance. Their greedy smiles had faded, replaced by unease. "They are already breathing fire," Cole said nervously. "This is dangerous." Ryan stepped forward, his arms slightly outstretched as if shielding the hatchlings. "They will not harm me. But if you try to take them, they will fight. And so will I." For a long moment, silence filled the cavern. The miners glared at him, but they did not move closer. At last Bram spat on the ground. "Fool! Protect your little pets then. But one day others will learn your secret, and you will lose everything." With that, the two men turned and left, their lamps fading into the tunnel. When the cavern was quiet again, Ryan knelt down. The hatchlings pressed close to him, their bodies trembling. He stroked the air above them, not touching but near enough for them to feel calm. "It is all right," he whispered softly. "You were brave. You were stronger than me tonight." The hatchlings chirped, their eyes blinking slowly. One rubbed its head against his boot, and Ryan felt a swell of pride and fear together. He knew the danger was no longer only a shadow. Others now knew about the hatchlings. The secret was fragile, and it would not remain hidden forever. Yet even as worry filled him, another truth was stronger. The hatchlings had chosen him, and he had chosen them. Whatever dangers came, he would not leave them. That night, as he left the cavern, his heart was heavy with fear but also with determination. The bond had been tested and had not broken. And in the soft glow of the cavern, he had seen what even small dragons could do when they stood with him. The following days were tense. Ryan knew that the miners who had discovered the cavern might return. He kept a careful watch from the cliffs, scanning the horizon for any movement. Yet he also knew he could not abandon the hatchlings. They had come to trust him, and he could not let fear make him turn away. The hatchlings had grown noticeably stronger. Their wings stretched wider, claws sharper, and eyes brighter. They moved faster and experimented more with short bursts of flight. Ryan watched them closely, guiding them with soft words and gentle gestures. He had become more than a guardian, he had become a teacher. One evening, Ryan brought extra food and set it near the nest. The hatchlings chirped excitedly, crawling toward him and sniffing his hands. They seemed to sense that something was different. The air outside the cavern had changed, carrying faint sounds of distant voices. Ryan froze, listening. It was Bram and Cole. They had returned with two others this time. Their footsteps echoed against the cliff walls as they climbed toward the cavern entrance. Ryan's heart raced. He quickly gathered the hatchlings near him. The miners entered the chamber, their lamps lighting the space. "Hand them over," Bram said. His voice was harsh, but there was a flicker of caution in his eyes. Ryan stepped in front of the hatchlings, spreading his arms slightly. "They are not yours," he said calmly but firmly. "They are not for sale. You will not take them." Cole sneered. "You think a few little dragons can stop us? They are weak, small, and helpless. Hand them over, and no one will be hurt." The hatchlings hissed. They moved closer to Ryan, pressing against his legs. Their eyes glowed faintly in the light of the lamps. One of them, the smallest, stepped forward and spread its wings. A spark of fire flickered from its mouth. The others followed, circling him, their small claws clicking against the stone. Ryan knelt slightly, letting the hatchlings gather behind and around him. He spoke softly to them. "Do not be afraid. They are dangerous to us, but together we can protect each other." The miners advanced cautiously. They could see the faint sparks, the tiny flames, and they paused. Bram's jaw tightened. They are only hatchlings. We can handle them. Suddenly, the smallest hatchling jumped onto Ryan's shoulder. Its wings flapped rapidly, and it hissed loudly. The other three pressed even closer, making a protective circle. Ryan felt the heat of their tiny flames against his clothes, but he remained still, letting them act. The miners took a step back, surprised by the sudden display. They had underestimated the bond between human and dragons. Ryan realized that this moment was critical. He needed the hatchlings to choose him, to act as one. "Trust me," he whispered. "We are together. You are safe with me." The hatchlings responded. They hissed in unison, snapped their tiny jaws, and pressed against him more firmly. Their small wings flapped in the air, creating gusts that carried their faint heat across the cavern. The miners hesitated, unsure if they could risk advancing further. Cole raised his hand to grab one of the dragons, but before he could, a sudden burst of flame from the smallest hatchling startled him. He dropped back, burning a small hole in his sleeve. Bram cursed and tried to swing at the creatures, but the other hatchlings hissed and snapped, forcing him to retreat as well. Ryan remained calm, guiding them with his voice. "Stay together. Protect each other. Protect me." The hatchlings obeyed. They moved as a single unit, their trust in Ryan giving them courage. They pressed against him, using their tiny bodies and sparks of fire to create a barrier. The miners, now frightened, stepped back. They realized that these hatchlings were not just helpless creatures. They had a human ally, one who cared for them, and that bond made them stronger than expected. Finally, Bram and Cole exchanged a glance. Fear replaced their greed. "This is too risky," Bram muttered. "We will report it later. Leave them alone for now." The miners turned and left the cavern, their footsteps fading into the tunnel. Ryan stood slowly, his arms still near the hatchlings. They circled him, chirping softly, their bodies pressed close in a protective embrace. Ryan knelt and spoke to them. "You were brave. You chose to trust me, and you protected us together. I am proud of you." The hatchlings chirped in response, rubbing their heads against him. They no longer hesitated. Their fear of humans had vanished, replaced by the trust they had chosen to give Ryan. For the first time, the cavern felt completely safe. The hatchlings curled against him, their bodies warm and soft. They no longer cried for their mother who had left them. They had found someone who would care for them, and they had chosen him. Ryan realized that the choice of the hatchlings had changed everything. He was not just a guardian or a caretaker. He was part of their world, and they were part of his. Together, they formed a bond that no one could break. That night, he stayed longer in the cavern. The hatchlings pressed against him, their small bodies moving in rhythm with his own heartbeat. He whispered stories of earth, of seas and forests, of laughter and warmth. The hatchlings chirped in response, as if understanding the feeling behind the words. Ryan knew the danger was not over. Others would come, and the company rules could still threaten their safety. But for now, he felt a strength he had never known before. Together with the hatchlings, he could face the challenges ahead. As he left the cavern at dawn, he looked back once more. The hatchlings were curled together, their eyes half closed but alert. Their trust in him had been tested, and they had chosen him. Ryan felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility. He had not only protected them, he had earned their bond. And he knew that no matter what dangers the future held, the hatchlings would stand with him, and he would stand with them. The days that followed were quieter, though no less full of purpose. Ryan continued to visit the cavern each evening, carrying scraps of food, fresh water, and bits of cloth to make the hatchlings' nest more comfortable. They greeted him with chirps and soft hisses, their small wings flapping in excitement. Each time he entered, their trust reminded him of why he had made the choice to care for them. The hatchlings were growing rapidly. Their wings stretched wider, claws became sharper, and their scales seemed to glow brighter under the light of Ryan's lamp. They no longer stumbled as often when they moved, and their short attempts at flight had become longer and steadier. Ryan watched with pride, guiding them with gentle words and gestures, always careful not to frighten them. At the same time, Ryan continued to work at the camp. He was careful to keep his absences hidden, though the miners still whispered about him. Some guessed he had found a secret cave, while others wondered if he had discovered another type of treasure. Ryan ignored their curiosity, focusing on the safety of the hatchlings. He knew the day might come when he could not hide them forever. One evening, as he entered the cavern, he found the hatchlings gathered near the entrance. They chirped excitedly, circling his boots. Ryan knelt and set down the bag of food. They rushed forward, their tiny bodies brushing against him as they ate. The smallest hatchling climbed onto his shoulder, spreading its wings slightly and resting its head near his neck. Ryan smiled and stroked the air above them, careful not to touch but offering comfort. He whispered, "You are strong now. You have learned to trust me, and I will always protect you." As the hatchlings ate and played, Ryan thought about the journey that had brought them together. When he first discovered them, they had been weak and frightened, crying for a mother who would never return. He had chosen to help them, knowing the risk of breaking the camp rules. And in doing so, he had found a bond stronger than fear, stronger than any rule. Ryan's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise outside the cavern. He froze, listening. Footsteps echoed on the cliffside. His heart beat quickly. Had the miners returned? He peered out of the tunnel, and to his relief, it was not humans but the wind carrying dust and loose rocks. The sound reminded him that danger always lingered nearby. Inside, the hatchlings had begun experimenting with their wings. One flapped and lifted itself a few inches off the ground, landing clumsily but proud. Another followed, climbing onto a small rock and attempting to jump. Ryan clapped softly and encouraged them. "Good. You can do it. Keep trying." Hours passed, and the cavern was filled with soft chirps, the rustle of wings, and the occasional spark of fire from the smallest hatchling. The creatures were no longer helpless. They were learning, growing, and thriving. Ryan felt a deep sense of accomplishment. His care had made a difference. As night deepened, the hatchlings began to curl together, pressing against him for warmth. He settled on the cold stone, letting them rest against his chest and legs. Their tiny bodies radiated warmth, and their soft breaths mixed with the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. For the first time in months, Ryan felt complete peace. He whispered stories of Earth again, soft words of seas, forests, and gentle rain. The hatchlings listened, their eyes half closed but attentive. Though they could not understand the words, they understood the feeling behind them, the warmth of care, the safety of trust, and the love of someone who chose to protect them. Ryan thought of the miners, of the dangers that still waited outside the cavern. He knew that others might come, and rules could force him to leave. But he also knew something stronger had formed, the bond between him and the hatchlings. That bond was not just protection, it was a family built on trust. When dawn approached, Ryan prepared to leave. He rose slowly, careful not to disturb the hatchlings. They chirped softly, nudging him with their tiny heads, reluctant to let him go. He knelt and whispered, "I will return tonight. You are safe with me, always." The hatchlings pressed closer, as if understanding his promise. He stepped into the light of the early morning. The cliffs were quiet, the wind soft against his face. As he walked back to the camp, he felt the weight of responsibility and the warmth of love he had never expected to find on a harsh mining world. The hatchlings had changed him. They had shown him that compassion, patience, and care could create something stronger than fear or greed. Over the following weeks, the hatchlings continued to grow. Their wings were longer, their claws sharper, and their small sparks of fire more controlled. They learned to follow simple commands, to play together, and to rest safely in the nest Ryan had made for them. Their trust in him never wavered. Ryan, in turn, learned to listen to them more closely. He understood the subtle sounds of their chirps, the movements of their wings, and the way they pressed against him when they were frightened. He became more patient, more careful, and more aware of the life that depended on his care. One evening, as he sat with them, he looked around the cavern. The walls no longer felt empty or cold. They were filled with life, with the chirps of hatchlings, the rustle of wings, and the warmth of trust. For the first time, he realized that even on a world as harsh as Vera, kindness and care could create a home. The hatchlings curled around him, their tiny bodies warm and soft. They had learned to rely on him, and he had learned to protect them. Together, they had created a small world of safety and love, a place where fear could not enter. Ryan whispered once more, "We will face the world together. You are my family, and I am yours." The hatchlings chirped softly, pressing closer. The sun began to rise over the cliffs. Its pale light touched the cavern entrance, illuminating the white scales of the hatchlings and the quiet smile on Ryan's face. The warmth of the morning was gentle, but the warmth he felt inside was stronger, a warmth born of trust, compassion, and the bond between human and dragons. Ryan knew that no matter what challenges came, no matter how harsh the world outside might be, they had each other. And that bond, stronger than fear, stronger than rules or danger, would keep them safe. The albino hatchlings had found a home, not in stone or cave, but in the heart of a human who chose to care for them. And Ryan had found something rare on a cold, gray world, the love of creatures who trusted him completely. Together, they faced the future, not with fear, but with hope, warmth, and the quiet certainty that even in the harshest worlds, humanity's heart could create safety, comfort, and family.